Hello and good afternoon, everyone. So those who've seen our live videos before have probably normally it's a one-to-one interview. So we're doing something a bit different today. What I've been doing, I've been joined by an expert panel, and we're going to talk all about sales today. So sales strategy, sales itself, working in sales, how to deal with certain situations. So I'm delighted that, as you can see on the screen, I'm joined by Michelle, Jeff, and Pete. I will get them to introduce themselves in a few seconds. But I'd like to say, anybody who's watching it, please do put your questions to the panel. I've got a few questions that have been sent in advance, because the guys don't even know that. So I'm going to ask them in a minute. But if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them in. So if you can kind of briefly introduce yourself. Pete, if I'll start with you, if that's all right, and then Michelle, and then Jeff. We'll go in that order to start with.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Pete Evans. I'm the Managing Director of SalesStar, which is a joint venture between my business and SalesStar in New Zealand. And we work with businesses to transform sales performance.
Hi, everybody. My name's Michelle Cowan. I am the co-founder and managing director of Justo Software, the home of the Social Sender app. I'm also a non-exec director and a podcast host, and I've spent all of my corporate career in sales.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Dunn. I'm an independent commercial insurance broker. I'm the client director at Spencer Hayes Insurance Brokers.
Thank you very much, guys. Now, plenty of experience, plenty of knowledge in sales. So I'm going to start with a question that is probably quite a common one, and a few people have sent me in slightly different ways, but they've essentially said, how do I deal with the objection of I want a discount or it is too expensive? Now, I'm going to come to you on this, Pete, because I know this is a thing you like to talk about a lot. So how do you deal when someone says, I want a discount?
Well, I mean, the first thing is I thoroughly believe that you shouldn't discount, because you're setting your stall out with your customer, your prospect. The moment you say that you're prepared to discount, you're underselling the value of your product or service. And I know that Jeff, Michelle, and I were talking about this before, but if the client actually asks you at the end of your sales process, will you provide a discount? It actually goes back to the very start of your sales process, and you've not actually created the value in your own sales process or in the journey for the buyer. And interestingly, although we're in the business of sales transformation, it is a question we get asked by a lot of clients. And my response to that is, so one of the problems you've identified is that your salespeople are discounting, and you want to select a company, a sales transformation business that's prepared to discount. No, we're not prepared to do it. I think you've also got to identify the walkaway position as well. And what I say is, look, if you're going to look for a discount, or you want to negotiate, then what are we going to get back in return? You know, that's the way that I would handle it.
So essentially, there, Pete, it's, okay, well, what is your budget? And if that's the budget, we'll make what we offer you to fit that. So I'll take away X, Y, and Z, if that's what you're going to pay.
Yeah. Sometimes what I'll say is, so what part of the proposal would you like us to take out? And then see that, then see the reaction. Oh, I don't want you to take anything out then. Well, or what you might say as well is, okay, if your budget's tight, what can we do over 3 months? And let's trial this over 3 months. But I think get away from using the word discount. What they're trying to do is to negotiate with you.
Yeah.
The other thing as well you can do is flip it and say, just out of interest, how do you respond when one of your prospects asks you for a discount?
I totally agree, Pete. And, I'm with you on the value and selling the value throughout the process. And actually, most businesses have gone through a process themselves of some kind of pricing strategy and arriving at that price, which is where, the value is knitted into that price. What I think that some people do need to be aware of, especially if you're working in the corporate world where there's a big purchasing team, you might actually be working with a purchasing team that is actually bonused on discounting. So part of your research in terms of understanding a customer and going through that cycle is understanding that, is that process in place with your customer? Because if it is, then you need to be mindful about your entry point into that customer. but also totally agree with Pete. If they want a discount, then try and understand how much money they've got and what actually that will buy them.
Absolutely.
In my world, I think I've got the hardest gig because insurance is an intangible thing. You can't see insurance. It just gives you benefit if you need to get in a claiming situation. So I'm with Michelle and Pete in that you have to take the customer with you from the start, and then the price is at the end, and it's within reason. It's immaterial what the price is, and if it is budget related for the client and they've made it clear at the start, then it comes down to the client's options. So you're laying out for them a solution or more than one solution, and it's a case of what's important to the client.
Do you think then that if and obviously I know this is an area you work in, Pete, if you're continually getting asked about discounting or reducing your price, actually it's not about dealing with those individual objections. It's about looking at what your sales process and what you're doing in advance to make sure essentially you head off that objection before it even comes about.
Yeah, I think it's also how you position yourself, and part of this is related to the messages you've been going to in terms of marketing. And I see a lot of companies where they've got the prices on the website, and I think, Jeff's exactly right. He works in what is seen as a commodity. Everybody needs insurance, but they don't want to buy it. And I think as well, we've seen great advances in, the sales profession, in marketing, particularly with, the internet, and people can research. The problem that we all face these days is somebody can go onto Google and say, well, I can buy my commercial insurance cheaper online, but they don't fully understand what they're buying. And I think, what I will ask up front is, so tell me what your decision-making process is. Who's going to be involved in making this decision? And I might get, if I'm selling to Michelle, she might say, well, my finance director will get involved. So who's that, Jeff? What's Jeff like? Well, everything is about money. Jeff will be looking to beat you down on price. Okay, so what are the factors that will Jeff take into account? So, for example, we have a return on investment calculator. So in our sales process, I will say, so if we can demonstrate that we can bring value, we can increase sales, we can help your salespeople increase margins, how will your finance director respond then? So provide tools that demonstrate the value. Value is a word, but you've got to be able to demonstrate the value. And people have got to be able to see the value. And that's where things like case studies can help you, testimonials, getting involved in things like this as well. Demonstrate the additional value. So personally, I've used Jeff as my commercial insurance broker. I could probably get what he does cheaper, but it's not about the price. It's about what happens if something goes wrong. It's that reassurance. I get people saying to me, but I can buy content. I can get it all for free on YouTube. And what I say is, that's great. There's loads of content on YouTube. Who's going to keep your sales managers accountable? That's what you're paying for. And who's going to make sure this is going to happen?
And Pete, if I may briefly rewind to your opening remark there around people self-serving online for commercial insurance. That's absolutely wonderful, as long as they're experts in commercial insurance, which of course most people aren't. Yeah,
great point.
I think there's a distinction as well that needs to be made between products and services and kind of recurring revenue and one-off capital purchases. The strategy around pricing could be different for all of those, but also, you might be a new entrant into the market. You might be in a mature market. All those things have got to be considered when you're putting your pricing together. And, when you get to that point, have some conviction behind it and hold your nerve sort of thing.
Yeah, it's about knowing where you're placed in the market as well, isn't it? If, like you said, Michelle, if you're a new entrant, for example, and your strategy for the next few years is all about getting as much market share as possible, then that's fine. You would price accordingly, and it's about understanding what it is. I think is so important. That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think that pricing strategy is often overlooked in sales because in some organizations it's dealt with by marketing.
Yeah.
And, it's really quite a big thing, especially, again, like I say, if you're a new entrant, and I'm talking from my standpoint of, I worked for a corporate where that was all nailed down, to setting up my own business which is a SaaS model, and having to sort of come up with it myself. So, looking at all the different factors and making sure that you get your pricing right, so that when you get to that point, you really truly do understand where that price has come from.
Yeah. I'd like to add something else as well, just picking on what Michelle said. It's also, when you're selling, it's understanding your own margins, what your gross profit margin is, what your net profit margin is, so that if you do have to give away something, you understand the impact on your own bottom line as well. Because if you if you give a discount of 10%, that has a massive implication on your profit margin. And a lot of people who are selling don't understand it. They'll say to me, well, I've only discounted by 10%. And I said, have you worked the numbers back in terms of how much that affects your bottom line? And they don't understand, like Michelle says, how the pricing is arrived at.
Yeah, I think I heard you say before, Pete, a couple of years ago at an event I was at, I think it was sort of, you did an analogy about giving a discount's like going to the pub for a drink with your mate and taking a tenner out of your back pocket and just giving it them.
Yeah.
But then in this case, it might be a complete stranger.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also we live in this world where other experts in inverted commas are encouraging your buyers to ask for discounts. See how far we can push, or if we're in a pitch situation, they'll say, well, we've got somebody in who can do it at a quarter of the price.
On the point about pricing that Michelle mentioned, years ago I used to work for Norwich Union, which then became Aviva. But when it was Norwich Union, and obviously we all remember Norwich Union and we'd regard them as probably having a mature place in the marketplace, but they had quite a naive strategy. We had a chief exec who 1 year literally gave us all in sales a message of fill my factory. That was his message, fill my factory or go for growth. And then about 18 months later, no surprises, the claims caught up with the premium income, and then it was squeeze the margin, grumbling end customers, but we'd actually created the monster. We created the monster. So it's interesting. I'd like to think that insurers, particularly my space, I'd like to think that we've learned from that, but I do see the odd example where no, they haven't learned from that.
No. Absolutely, Jeff. So I want to move on to a question that someone else has asked, actually. I think it's a really good one. Is speaking to a lot of business owners, quite often they will say, I am good at what I am doing, but I'm not very good at sales, or I don't like sales, or whatever it might be. So kind of following on slightly from that question, do you think people are naturally good at sales or not? Or is it something that anybody can do if they've got the right skills? So Michelle, I'll go to you first on that, actually.
Yeah, I think there's a salesperson in everybody, although lots of individuals don't like that label of salesperson. But if you've got your own business, you've sold your concept to somebody, you've explained it to the bank, you've done a business plan, you've got those kind of selling skills, but perhaps don't understand the process. I believe that anybody can learn the process. Pete's probably going to disagree with me now, but I think what differentiates a salesperson from a really brilliant salesperson is that ability to connect with other people, listen, be a good listener. Lots of people talk a lot, including me, Jeff and Pete, but I know that all three of us can listen. And, don't be lazy. Just, do your homework, do the research. There's so much information out there. So I think that, that's a really quick sort of description, but I believe that there's a salesperson in everybody. You can learn the process. It can be taught, but the really good salespeople, the natural salespeople, I think are the ones that can connect very easily with other people.
Good. Jeff, what's your thoughts on that?
Agree with all of what Michelle said, but would add the know your material aspect. You could have somebody who is moderately good at sales, but knows their material back to front. And I don't mean a script. I just mean the background on the client, their own end-to-end process, what they're trying to get out of it, the numbers that sit behind that. You could have a moderately good salesperson, but who has all of those things sitting almost hidden under the waterline to fall back on. And that person, as long as they have a desire to succeed, that person would be successful.
Good. Pete?
Yeah, I think, you know, what Michelle said about the natural born salesperson. I think a lot of us who went into sales probably fell into it by accident. So I was made redundant by Royal Insurance, and I took a personality profile by a redundancy counsellor. And the guy said to me, he said, "Well, you don't want to go into admin now. You've been, you know, head of graduate recruitment." He said, "Why don't you go into sales?" So I fell into sales by accident, and I became successful in a sort of corporate sales career. But what fascinated me was why somebody who was really shy at school should be successful in selling. And I think that, picking up on the great points Michelle and Jeff have made, success in sales is about 80% of mindset and 20% skill. And I've
We've lost Pete for a second there. I don't know where he's gone. Anyway,
I've seen a lot of successful people in sales. Yeah, I'm here. I'm back, Michael. Can you hear us?
We can hear you now, Pete.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of successful people in sales who've got skills, a lot of people in sales who've got the skills, but they don't apply themselves. You know, and I have to relate it back to sport. You see a lot of talented people, you know, they start out 16, 17 in football. They think they're going to play for England, but they don't have the mindset to apply themselves. So I think, picking up on the point Jeff made, it's about application, but you can learn how to ask the right questions, create the value. And if you want to get better at selling, if you own a small business and you've not got a sales team, there's lots of great information out there in how to ask great questions. What I experienced, and I'm sure Michelle has seen this in her corporate career, and, you know, Jeff, is you get a lot of people, they ring you up for a meeting, and then you have a face-to-face meeting or a Zoom meeting, and they do what I call show up and throw up. So they think they've got the best product, and they never ask you any questions about your business. And I had a classic the other day. Somebody rang me up, and they said they'd connected with me on LinkedIn, and I hadn't paid much attention to what they do. And they said, "Pete, your business really needs what we do." And I said, "What's that?" They said, "You really need sales training."
Excellent.
And I just let them carry on, and they just like, blah, 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 blah. I said, "Do you actually know what we do?" Yeah. I mean, they had no idea. So I think you get a lot of that when people are trying to sell. They think, "Oh, great, I've got a meeting with Michelle," and we sit down and we meet, and then I go, "Here's my great slide deck I've got," but I haven't asked Michelle any questions. And then Michelle might go, "I'm really interested," and that's when that leads to discounting.
Pete, you're so right what you say. My biggest thing, rightly or wrongly for myself, is I'm interested in people, what the story is to what's brought them where they are now, what drives them, the company they work for, where's the company come from, why do they think they fit in with the company?
Yeah.
And then everything else builds from that. It almost becomes a conversation. Of course, a conversation that you would try and control for the end result that you want. But, you know, why not just be interested in the person?
I mean, it goes back to, it's probably one of the oldest sayings in sales, isn't it? Two ears, one mouth. Probably anyone who's worked in sales has heard that, and it's something to remember. I understand it with all being new in sales, especially when you're in a new job and you want to kind of prove that you know everything about everything you're talking about. But listening, there's no better way. Absolutely. So we've had a couple of comments actually on social media as well. So Phil has agreed with about what you were saying, Pete, about he was very shy at school but ended up in sales. So it's not necessary that someone's a natural salesperson. Thank you for that point, Phil. Chris, I know this is taking Pete and Jeff is taking you nearly out of screen, this one. But anyway, talking about discounting at the earlier point. How often it creeps in and can hurt your business. Absolutely. That's a really good point. People do appreciate quality, and I think that's kind of what you were saying, wasn't it, Pete, about value, really? once you build that value, it becomes less of an issue. So you kind of probably half answered this question actually a little bit, and someone had asked me this earlier to ask you guys: if you're employing someone, so you're taking someone on to be in your sales team, what would you be looking for in those people? So I'll start with you, Jeff, this time, if that's all right.
I would want someone who had chosen to apply for the position, not in a haphazard way, i.e. the want to be in the industry in which I work. I have had many years' experience of running sales teams within insurance companies and brokerages, and I really do myself, before I answer your question, mate, I really do enjoy the challenge of taking raw material or a raw recruit, if you like, and as best I can, giving them the best platform to succeed. It's got to start, though, a bit like I said in the previous question that we spoke about, around showing an interest in things. So that person would have to show an interest in the industry and in sales and in wanting to get on. But they would also need to show a willingness to learn without being ageist, because you'd all shoot me because I'm the oldest. There is, particularly in some younger people, an impatientness to try and get to the end result without realizing that you have to go through a process, be it a process that Pete would take a sales team through, I would take some through as a member of my sales team, Michelle, or anyone else running a sales team. There has to be a buy-in by the person that no one's going to click their fingers and deliver to you a successful salesperson.
Yeah, I think for me, if I was looking to recruit somebody that could hit the ground running, I would be looking at track record, proven track record, and whether they would be the right kind of cultural fit for me if we shared the same values. I wouldn't be looking to recruit somebody that is a double of me. I'm all for diversity and what diversity brings in terms of innovation and new ideas. If I was looking for a trainee, like Jeff said, I'd be looking for somebody who's really eager to get involved in sales, in the industry, that if somebody who's done the homework, that is perhaps thinking outside the box a little bit, because lots of salespeople have got to be creative when it gets tough. It's okay when the orders are coming in, but when they're not coming in, or there's slowdown in the economy and different microeconomic things being thrown at you, that's when salespeople have to get really creative because it's tough. So I'd be looking for those kind of people, bit more creative, bit thinkers outside of the box, somebody who's keen to learn, who really wants to be in sales, because it's not a career for everybody.
Absolutely. Pete?
Yeah, I mean, some great thoughts there, comments from Michelle and Jeff. We have a comment in our business that if you're hiring experienced salespeople, the salespeople do the best selling in the interview process, and the track record and CV can only tell you one aspect of what they're going to bring to the business. And a lot of the work we do with companies that have got existing sales teams is to help those businesses understand what great looks like in the hiring process. I would certainly, if I'm hiring experienced salespeople, I would certainly want to use an assessment tool as part of that process to help screen out the bad hires. And time and again, when we engage with a client and we're asking about the hiring process, they will come up with the horror stories and they'll say, well, we had this guy Jeff, he was highly recommended by the recruiter, his CV looked fantastic, the previous brokerage he worked at, he was bringing in £10 million of income a year, and we had to fire him after 3 weeks. Why? Well, he was a mood hoover, he was lazy. Sorry, Jeff.
Is this a real life example, Pete?
No, it's not a real life example. But this is the sort of thing that we find him and say, well, what didn't you see? Well, he interviewed great. His presentation was really slick. He was suited and booted. But actually, we found out we wanted him to hunt new business, and he kept saying to us, "Where's the existing account?" So it's mindset counts for a lot, and often people can put on a show for 3 months. And a lot of the work we now do with clients is encouraging the clients to hire for mindsets, and actually ignoring the fact they may not have industry experience, but they're used to calling on the level of people you want them to call. And so I'll just use Jeff as an example here, but in his sector, if I went to Jeff and said, you need to hire somebody who's no commercial insurance experience, you'd probably go, no, I'm not doing that. And that's what a lot of our clients say at the outset. They'll say, would you like to hire somebody who's used to speaking to business owners or finance directors about risk? He might be a bit more open and receptive. And picking on what Michelle said, if you carry on doing the same thing and hiring people from your sector, you're restricting your talent pool. If you're prepared to hire somebody who's not from your sector but has the skills and mindset, they probably bring in some different thinking into that organization. And we often find working with clients that because they're prepared to hire from outside their industry or sector, they then bring in somebody who's an A player.
I think it's worth also talking about that sort of new business versus account manager role.
Yeah.
In small businesses, most salespeople are doing both roles. In larger corporates, you're one or the other generally, and it's a very different skill set. And actually, you could end up with, like the example that Pete gave, with a really experienced account manager who cannot knock on doors. That would be a massive challenge. Whereas you get those kind of salespeople that are just natural door openers and are just wade in, which is great. And that's the kind of, you get a different kind of satisfaction from doing both of those sales roles. Ultimately we're looking for growth and more sales, but it's a different skill set.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting. Actually, all of you kind of touched on to greater or lesser degree around either self-development, learning, mindset. I think they kind of all rolled into one. And I remember years ago reading some book myself, and it said that when he hired for salespeople, the first question he asked them, what was the last self-development book they read? And if they hadn't read one in the last 30 days, it'd finish the interview there. Now, obviously, the world's moved on, and we've got podcasts and we've got audios, so it wouldn't have to be a book directly. But that he said that it was kind of he saw their mindset from that. It wasn't so much about what they had read; it was more about the way they felt and the way they acted, and it was really interesting. I think you all kind of touched on it to a certain degree as well. So another question I've had is actually about, well, I guess what's happened in the last year or so and sales and how it's changing. So it's how do you think things will move on now? Obviously, we've all now used to doing videos like this, and we spent a lot of time on there. Eventually the world is going to return back to some sort of normality. How do you see sales progressing in the future? How do you think it's going to change from maybe what it was 12 months ago? Let's go to Pete to start with. Is that all right?
Personally, I think the world of sales has changed forever. I think the changes we're seeing with people having to do discovery meetings using Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, I think this is here to stay. It's probably accelerated changes that were going to happen in sales by 5 years. I think the other thing that salespeople and organizations, and even those of us who own a small business and perhaps we're the salesperson as well, is that it's harder in some ways it's harder to get hold of the decision makers, but it's also easier because obviously, people are working from home. They're not traveling as much. But coming back to the original question, for the first question about discounting, there's more people involved in the buying process. Decisions about doing business are getting longer, and you've got to learn how to negotiate better as well. So what we're seeing from the science and research is that negotiation skills, you've got to hone up on your negotiation skills really clearly, and you've got to learn how to sell screen to screen. that's going to be a key skill. I think a lot of people say, well, I know how to do that. I can jump on a Zoom call, but they don't know how to conduct a discovery call using Zoom and the technology. And there's even things like, how do you set your lighting up? Should you have your brand in the background? How do you speak? Do you record it? And how do you analyze it? A lot of people I speak to in business say, well, it's just a case of just jumping on a bit of software. And, you know, there's different things. I think we believe, and this is based on, I think, some research from McKinsey's, that it's probably going to go back to 50% face-to-face and 50% screen to screen. But I think these days, if you ring somebody up and say, Jeff, I'll just pop down for a coffee for a catch-up, I think people are getting busier. I think it comes back to its value. If you're going to have a face-to-face meeting with somebody, you're going to have to make it much more purposeful than it was in the past. And we've got some clients where the salespeople are saying, we can't wait till we get back to what it was like in February. We could just get in our car and drop in and go and see people. Well, that's not selling. You know, that's an overpaid order taker.
I agree with that. For me, I've noticed a change in mindset with the people I've been dealing with. So in between the two lockdowns, when I felt personally safe, whatever that means, it means different things to different people, obviously. But whenever I've felt safe, I've said to clients, I will come and see you subject to social distancing. And very, very interestingly, there's been a massive increase in clients saying, in an apologetic way almost, Jeff, is it okay if we do all of it on Zoom? And the answer is, it's absolutely perfectly okay with me if I'm saving 2 hours driving and I'm going to get the same end result. But I have noticed this change, and linked to that again, just in my space, a lot of clients are saying the very thing that I've told all of you, and hopefully some of the people watching this, that is the differentiator between me and other people who do my role for other companies, which is clients are saying, can I send you a copy of all of my existing policies and will you try and beat that price? Whereas a lot of brokers before COVID were saying to clients, send me your documents and I'll try and beat that price. That's not the way I work. I want to get to know the person, the company, the drivers, the stresses that the person's business is under, and then try and fit the insurance around that. So I've noticed almost a step back by clients away from personal meetings and wanting to just send the documents and make it, as Pete said a little bit earlier, more of a transaction. And in my space, that's not the way to do it. It really isn't.
Yeah.
With that, sorry, before we go to you, Michelle, there's a great comment from Phil actually about it's not as new as we probably think it is. We first started out in many clients in the US and used to use MSN Messenger. I remember when I was at school using that, and then moved to Skype. So things. I think you said earlier, didn't you, Pete, about trends accelerating? I think that's what this has done more than it's not brought anything new as such. It's just moved it a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Michelle.
There was a move towards virtual selling from lots of the big corporates probably about 5 to 7 years ago. And they've been operating in that mode for a long time. I think the medium, small businesses have obviously had to make that shift very quickly. So we're in this virtual selling. It's merging with digital selling. Like Pete says, you've got to get it right. Don't just turn up in your pajamas with the light wrong and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's, the people are still the same salespeople, just the company car is now Zoom. And, I for one, I'm happy that I don't have to do all the traveling to customer meetings. I had a call this morning with somebody who I'm looking to use as a supplier. And he said, oh, should we do a Zoom? And I said, actually, I've got to run an errand. I'm in the car. Can we do old school and on the phone? And he was like, oh, that's novel. So I just think that during lockdown, we've all experienced a different kind of working. And for some people, it's worked and for some people, it hasn't. But for everybody, it has changed forever. I don't think there are many people that think they are truly going to go back to working in the same way that they were before, particularly salespeople.
I think the important thing to remember on that is it's not actually what the salesperson wants to do; it's what their customer wants to do, isn't it? And I've been in like national sales roles, and now and again, I'd love jumping in my car and driving to Cardiff and back and having a day doing that. But you know, quite frankly, I could have, if technology was there that we have now, I could have done it on Zoom, and most of the time. So I think we'll, you know, going a bit more of a hybrid world. Anyway, I think is going to be the way forward. But I think you made the great point earlier about how when it is face to face, it's going to have to deliver some real value. I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. People will value their time more than maybe they did before.
Mm-hmm.
A challenge for me going forward in the next 2 or 3 years is trying to do a lot of what I do from a foreign country, i.e. Spain.
It's not a bad challenge, that, Jeff.
Well, it's made me a little bit nervous, but it's a challenge I'll be taking up as literally a real life experiment.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me. I might try and join you on that, Jeff. So I'd love to know, like, if, from your experience, guys, what are the common mistakes salespeople make? So what we've already touched on discounting, but kind of anything else, the common things that you've seen that people should maybe be aware of. Michelle, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. It's been a thread throughout, just not listening. You know, listen to your customers, try and understand more about their business so that you can figure out in the background how your product and service can really enhance their kind of being. Not doing enough research. You know, we've all got Google. There's stuff out there. If you sell into medium to large companies, there is so much information out there, you know. And I was talking to somebody the other day that was actually going for a role with a big corporate, and he was trying to sort of come up with ideas for what he should put in his cover letter. And he'd started off with kind of repeating the key items that were in his CV, and then a couple of highlights, what were great about this company that he'd read on the internet, which, you know, is to me is a me too lazy kind of covering letter. What I tried to encourage him to do was dig a bit deeper. You know, this is a public company. There's lots of press out there. There's a company report somewhere that's got a chairman's statement in that says what's really, really important to the company. And when he started digging, he found out all these projects that this big corporate were doing, you know, around CSR and just people, planet, all the really kind of nice stuff, and brought that into his covering letter. He actually did get an interview for the role. So I think it's about just being more mindful, listening properly, do your research, don't be lazy.
It's good. Pete?
I think there's a couple of things to be. You've got to have a strategy. And I think, you know, linking back to what Michelle said, is you can do lots of research, you know, you can do lots of research, but if you understand your target market, then you can qualify opportunities out of your pipeline much earlier in that process. I think what I see, and we see this in, you know, small companies, medium-sized companies, and larger companies. They can't define their ideal clients. They can't define who they're targeting. So we target the owner of the business, whatever size it is. If it's a larger organization, we target the CEO. We don't want to speak to the sales manager. We don't want to speak to the sales director because they could be part of the problem. So have it clearly defined. We have a lead generation strategy, which one of my team, Kath, follows up on all the leads, but we qualify out very quickly in that process. We might put them back into lead nurturing and marketing, but I think my key tip is learn how to qualify somebody out in a nice way. I know I've heard Jeff at networking events say he doesn't want leads for private car insurance. He's actually said you'd be better off going online to buy that. So what Jeff's doing is he's defining people he doesn't want to deal with.
I think
lead
that
generation activity. And he said to me, he primarily wants to deal with owners of owner-managed businesses that have these particular challenges. So I know that I can refer with confidence. But if I say to him, what about all these old people who live in this nursing home? That's not his target market. So understand your target market and don't try and have a scattergun approach.
I think that's a really interesting point about the qualifying out, Pete, actually, because I found a lot when I was working in sales, you had a manager who was always asking you, what's in your pipeline, what's in your pipeline, what's in your pipeline? And so therefore it was tempting. They were delivering a strategy, essentially, was telling you not to qualify things out because they weren't really that bothered about, they weren't talking about what you had done, they were talking about what was in your pipeline. So that comes to the strategy element of what you were saying, wasn't it? It's really important. Exactly. So the management to do that the right things.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Okay, so I think there's two sets of mistakes that can be made, one by employees and one by employer. So the employee first, which is not realizing when clients are throwing up objections during the sales pitching process and solution process. Those objections can be real objections, or they could be perhaps imagined objections. So I think that's an issue. And similarly for the employer, I think there are still employers who are putting people in front of their clients to try and get orders without either training that staff member adequately, or in some cases that person is just totally unsuitable for a role in sales and the employer hasn't spotted it, which actually is really unfair on the employee.
That great point, Jeff. No, that's absolutely spot on. So I've got one last question for you all, if that's all right. Now you've all kind of worked in sales for various lengths of time. If you were starting again, would you do the same thing? Would you go into sales? So I'll start with Michelle. Go on. Would you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of fell into sales very early in my career. It was an accident. I didn't even know that corporate sales was a thing. As soon as I got into corporate sales, I absolutely loved it. I had a fantastic corporate sales career up until 3 years ago. I think it's a great opportunity to meet lots of different people and really have a lot of fun doing it. I think, it's a great career. I would encourage anybody to go into sales.
Thank you, Michelle. Jeff?
I'm blessed. I meet interesting, funny, humorous, intelligent people every day, purely because of the role that I'm in. And it's given me a half decent living. And I'm genuinely interested in it. And something that none of us have mentioned, it's not a buzz phrase or anything, but I'm sure everyone would agree that a successful salesperson has to have a thing called fire in their belly. And, I've been doing this a long time and I've still got fire in my belly. So I'm definitely in the right role and I wouldn't change a thing.
Anyone who knows Jeff will agree with that, I'm sure. Finally, doing what you do, Pete, I kind of know your answer, but go on.
Yeah, I've no regrets about falling into a corporate sales career completely by accident. I would reiterate what Michelle and Jeff said. I've had some highs and lows in sales, but I've learned so much. I've had the opportunity to travel extensively in a corporate sales career through sort of incentive plans. I think Jeff said, it's given me a good lifestyle, and doing what I do now, working with organizations to transform sales. I get to meet some great people. We've got clients that are startups, right up into the global space. But I really enjoy what I do, and I think every day is a learning day. And I think being able to, as one of my team puts it, inspire excellence in organizations in the sales channel. It's tough, it's hard work, but it's really enjoyable. And I think I get my most satisfaction when a salesperson will ring up as part of a team that we might be coaching, saying, "You've really inspired us to make some changes. I'm asking questions better. I got a call from a member of a sales team a few weeks ago, and he said, "Pete, I want to give you some feedback about the work you've been doing with our business." And what is he said? "Well, I was with an existing customer, and he said, I've been really struggling to increase the share of customer spend in the last 12 months. And he said, I was sat in front of the board and they said, have you been having some training? And they said, yeah, we've been on a 12-month transformation program. I said, well, it clearly shows, he said, because we're going to place a big order with you. Your questioning, your mindset has improved massively. Brilliant. You know, that's where you see people change. And I think there's been a big point made about continued learning. One of my clients said last year to me, he said, do you know what, Pete? He said, salespeople want to be regarded as professionals. They're some of the most ill-read and illiterate people in the universe. And that's true. If you want to get better at something, then you don't have to invest tens of thousands of pounds. There's loads of, you know, free podcasts, free talks on YouTube, you know, or you can get somebody to buddy up with. And one of my biggest tips is, and I see lots of people in business who are on their own not doing this, if you want to get better at something, practice and role play. And salespeople in corporates, and Michelle, I'm sure is not ahead of here, so they hate practice. But you know what? It's a bit like, and I hate to say this, most sports teams don't enter the football pitch without having a game plan and practicing.
Oh, absolutely.
But more salespeople enter into pitching without having practiced.
No, absolutely. So we've had. I was going to finish there, but we've had another question, if that's all right, guys. Again, it's cutting you two off a little bit, but Chris has asked a great question about connecting via LinkedIn and Sales Navigator. How to grab their interest. Has anyone got any advice, any thoughts, what they think? Jeff, have you got anything?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of using LinkedIn, but don't necessarily use Navigator. I try a different approach, which is quite often you can, if you can look up the person and look up their contact details, I try and put a call into them. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, it's binary. It's either going to work or it isn't. You're going to find out quick. And the other reason is majority of people won't have done that. And that's why I do and have considerable success with it. But going back to the actual question itself, what I've seen work well and what I've seen work well on me when people have tried that technique to connect with myself is where they've said, I'm interested in what you do in your company and in your industry. So what they're basically purporting, because sometimes they're not telling the truth, but what they're doing is they're showing interest. And again, a little thread that's weaved its way through all of this discussion is be interested. So for me, if I received a request like that, I would probably get involved in connecting with the person.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeff. Michelle?
Yeah, the ones I can only speak from my experience, and I have connected to a few strangers based on messages that have come through LinkedIn. And the ones that I've connected with are the ones that they've looked at my profile, they've seen something in it, it kind of resonates with what they're doing, and they've made the connection. And that's been one thing. But the other thing is also where something's been timely for me. So where I've been thinking about something and somebody has sent me a LinkedIn, I think, actually, I've just been thinking about that. I'll just have a chat with them. And I've made 2 really good connections in the last 3 months via that route, which has kind of surprised me, really, because I'm getting a lot of these mails coming through LinkedIn Sales Navigator in mail that are so ill thought through, and we've got some of the same connections. Should we connect? Or I've seen your profile, it looks interesting. Or, you know, like Pete's trying to sell sales training to a sales trainer. You know, where they've really not thought about it. I mean, I actually got an email from a company from somebody in a company that I actually use, which was like, you know what, I'm one of your customers. You've not even realised that. So I think some people are doing it really well and some people are doing it really poorly. And the people that are doing it really poorly are kind of annoying a lot of people. but there are a few that I think have got it right.
Yeah.
You got anything to add to that, Pete?
Yeah, I think just reiterating what Michelle said. I mean, we use LinkedIn Navigator. I think it's a great tool, but it's about personalizing the connection request, and then when you connect with them, don't try and sell them something straight away. Get into a conversation. What we do in our business is when somebody's connected with us through Sales Navigator, is we'll send them a message, asking them some questions. It might be how what challenges you're facing in the current environment, and just it's like any form of lead generation, but nurture and think about leaving somebody with a lasting impression. I mean, I get connection requests from people, and I've had a similar experience to Michelle, where somebody in an organisation that we're already dealing with, where they're supplying services to us, I get another salesperson reaching out to me saying, what we do would be really good for your business. Thinking, well, I'm already spending money with you, so you can damage your reputation. But I think even if somebody doesn't want to do business with us initially, always leave them with a great impression. I mean, I had somebody recently that came on a workshop with me 5 years ago and then just reached out on LinkedIn saying, I'm sorry that, I've ignored you for 5 years, basically, but can we talk about how you can do business with these two businesses that I'm currently advising? And what they said was, it was down to the quality of the stuff that we've been sharing on LinkedIn.
I think what you've given me used a great example of something I was going to say actually there, Pete, was about seeing it as a long-term tool rather than a short-term tool, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So I would say, from what I know of Sales Navigator, you can select people as kind of potential leads and things like that, and then it brings you a separate feed of all their activities. So every time they post or they comment or anniversaries and all that kind of thing, is just keep working there, liking their post, commenting and things like that over time. This is going to Michelle's point, when the timing is right, if you've done enough of that work and you keep putting yourself in front of them, you've got a better chance. It's not the be all and end all, but you've got a better chance of it working for you, and then contacting you. Well, that's it from the questions, guys. I really want to thank you all for taking the time to answer all these questions. It's been really good and really interesting discussion. If anybody does want to find out more about any of the guys, Michelle, Jeff, and Pete, either let myself know. Obviously, they all are on LinkedIn as well, and please do check their profiles out. And if anyone's watching this as well on catch up, like I know a lot of people do, if there isn't any questions, please do put them forward, and I'm happy to put them to the guys afterwards, and we'll try and kind of reply on an individual basis best we can. So that's all from me. Like I said, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you all three of you for taking part.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys.